Jerry's not going to let the story come out that he wants Roger Goodell fired, because trust me, he wants Roger Goodell fired. But he can't even argue that right now because all the rest of ownership is so on board with him and he doesn't want to be an outlier. So he's just saying, can we at least just hold this guy accountable? NFL owners voted on Tuesday 31-1 to permit their compensation committee to open negotiations on a new contract with Commissioner Roger Goodell. Only one NFL owner, Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys, offered any dissent. Jerry and Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, actually got in some beef over this and they exchanged harsh words. But what fascinates me about this story, and I'm reading the ESPN story, and I want to read this passage here. In the 2 years since he received his latest contract, Goodell has helped usher in a new 10-year collective bargaining agreement with the union that added a 17th game, help ensure that the NFL didn't miss any games during the COVID-19 pandemic, and landed long-term broadcast deals with the new and existing partners worth more than $100 billion. The NFL's popularity is unquestioned despite a myriad of concerns about the long-term health of players. A lawsuit from St. Louis over the Rams' move to Los Angeles that ended up in a $790 million settlement, and repeated scandals and investigations into Washington Commanders owner Dan Snyder. And so ESPN is painting the picture that, Roger Goodell has been a flaming success, and that's why 31 of 32 owners, or actually it's 30 of 31. Is that right? Yeah, because the Green Bay Packers don't have an owner. Yeah, Green Bay doesn't have an owner. But whoever represents them voted along with this as well. And I'm reading this story and I'm like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Roger Goodell is this big flaming success and I don't know what I'm talking about. All the ownership is pleased and happy with him. This guy's, the greatest thing since Pete Rozelle. Is that, and I'll tell you what's also funny to me, this is the last little tidbit before I turn it over to you, but they don't mention that Brian Flores and these black coaches are suing, a handful of coaches are suing the NFL. That's not mentioned. And again, I don't blame Roger Goodell for that, but they talk about all these problems and somehow the media makes a big deal that we got this black coaches controversy. We're giving away 3rd and 4th round picks for people that sign black coaches or hire black coaches. But that's not mentioned at all. And so this article seems a bit bought and paid for by Roger Goodell and his handlers, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Roger Goodell is a big flaming success. Am I wrong?
So they did not mention Brian Flores. They didn't mention the Ray Rice debacle. They didn't mention the concussion lawsuits from 2011 and that settlement and how the NFL has become feminized and not even the same game over the last decade. They didn't mention how he totally mishandled Colin Kaepernick in the only time in the NFL's history they had a collapse in ratings, right? He's actually mishandled all sorts of things, but it depends on how you quantify how he's handling things, because the NFL owners don't care about ratings, they care about money. And if you look, he came in 2006. The total revenue of the NFL in 2006 was $6.5 billion. Today it's $17.2 billion. So we're in a position where he's tripled the revenue of these guys in a very short time. And so that's ultimately what they care about. And the dissent that you discussed, if you read further on in the article, Jerry Jones didn't actually dissent as far as saying he shouldn't be commissioner. All he said was, hey, I don't want to pay him that much unless he does the stuff that I want him to do. And so we're talking about these owners caring about money. Jerry Jones cares about money the most. He's saying, let's pay him less if he doesn't come through on these very things. That's the big thing.
I want to stop you there and just say I wouldn't characterize Jerry Jones' dissent that way. That's the way it's presented. But I don't think that's reality. Jerry wants to hold him accountable and doesn't want to just keep handing him money. And that's a fallback position. When you have that overwhelming support, Jerry's not going to let the story come out that he wants Roger Goodell fired, because trust me, he wants Roger Goodell fired. But he can't even argue that right now because all the rest of ownership is so on board with him, and he doesn't want to be an outlier. So he's just saying, can we at least just hold this guy accountable? Could we not just hand him these bonuses on these vague terms that we keep spelling out? This guy, again, I think in the story it said Roger Goodell in a 2-year window made $128 million.
Yep.
And Jerry, like, again, the more money you pay him, the harder it is to deal with him. Trust me on this. Take Dan Snyder, the owner of the Commanders. He can't stand Roger Goodell. He's been bullied and backed into a corner where he has to support Roger Goodell because these NFL owners, Jim Irsay, is talking about, hey, there's merit to getting rid of him. Roger Goodell and his cohorts, in my view, Dan Snyder can't say this, but in my view, is orchestrating a lot of the problems Dan Snyder is experiencing. This is Game of Thrones type war going on. People can't say what they really, really think. But if I've been following this for a long time. Dan Snyder, Jerry Jones, if you listen to Papa John, Ball State grad, friend of mine, these guys hate Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell is playing a great game of chess against his detractors and has backed them into a corner so much that 31 of the 32 NFL franchises say, hey, look, let's just give him this money. We don't even want to put stipulations. We don't even want to make him accountable for all this money we're paying him. They're building a better Frankenstein.
Could be. That's a fair argument. I think Jerry Jones has more influence than you're giving him credit for. He virtually single-handedly moved the Rams out of St. Louis. I mean, that wasn't going to happen without Jerry Jones getting a whole bunch of these owners who were against it. Remember when they had the committee out in with the Chargers when they were going to do the split stadium in a different place, the Chargers instead of the Rams. They had them out, and 5 out of 6 on that committee recommended something else. The owners, Jerry Jones came in, put his arm around everybody and said, why don't we do this? And so I do think he's got more influence. I don't think he'd be the only guy sitting in there. If he wanted some allies, I think he'd get his allies. You disagree?
I think he had a lot of influence. And here we are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, and he's lost his leverage. This is a moving Game of Thrones that Roger Goodell is winning. Most of these guys are cowards. They just want to protect their money. They're not real patriots. Jerry Jones is on an island right now. Trust me on this, Dan Snyder hates Roger Goodell.
Yes.
He voted.
No question.
He voted along with the crowd to save his own rear end. They have a gun to his head. And part of that gun was Jim Irsay saying, you know what, there's merit to getting rid of Dan Snyder. That was Jim Irsay cocking a gun at Dan Snyder's head on behalf of Roger Goodell. This is House of Dragons, Game of Thrones. Jerry's like King Viserys in House of Dragons. He's old. His influence is waning. The stuff you're talking about he did with St. Louis and all that and moving the Rams and all that was when he was at the height of his powers. He's no longer at the height of his powers. People are, they're probably thinking more about Stephen Jones than Jerry Jones. And all the little maverick innovations and the deals that Jerry cut for the Cowboys that were good for him, all that stuff's in the rearview mirror. Right now, what you're looking at, and again, it's a shotgun marriage, but if I went full Game of Thrones, all these guys are bending the knee and pulling out their swords and saying, I'm with House Goodell. And I don't like Goodell. I don't like what he's done, but I got to say hats off to him. He's winning this Game of Thrones.